Well, good morning, everyone. For those who are in Southeast Asia, Tuesdays with Gordon, we're back once again. Well, I would like to say I was all ready to go, Gordon, and somebody had tea time here.
Yeah. No, so good evening to those in America, and it's great to be talking again to um, Tommy. Unfortunately, last week we had a little bit of a technical issue, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, that you know what? Actually, that's right. We had a technical issue because we were supposed to come on earlier, and I had no Wi-Fi because I was upgrading my Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So, well, things like this do happen, though, doesn't it?
So Gordon, just to at least give you my story, my excuse is I upgraded to AT&T fiber, so it's a
Ah,
faster. So instead of a speed about 50 or 60, it's a speed
uh-huh.
about 400, 500 now
Wow. Wow. That's like almost 10 times the speed.
for the same price that I was paying before. So I said, of course I'm going to do
It's a
that.
bargain. It's a
Yeah.
bargain.
But one of the power lines went down, or one of the fiber optics cables went down. So after 2 hours after you and I got it, then it came back on.
Oh, well, that's okay. Well, we're back together again. That's the most important thing.
Well, from what I saw in your Facebook feed, it seems like there's been a lot of rain in Singapore.
Oh, terrible. Terrible, maybe the wrong word, but yes, we had lots of rain. I think there were like continuous rain going on for days, a couple of days. We didn't have it as bad as our neighboring country, Malaysia. So
Oh,
some parts of
really?
Malaysia were really flooded, and it was like till the top of the cars, and so cars was kind of floating down streets.
Yeah, yeah. Now, is this a rainy season in Singapore during this time, Gordon?
No, it's quite unusual. Usually it rains till about the Lunar New Year, Lunar
Yeah,
Chinese New Year, and then it starts to get warm and dry. And so this should have been the dry season,
yeah.
but for some strange reason, we see lots of rain clouds. But one of the great things is it's made Singapore very cool, so very, very much more pleasant.
Got it. Hey, for those who says that, man, what's that weather? I just blanked out.
Climate change.
Climate change doesn't exist. It exists because even Chicago, there are days it's freezing. Then it becomes 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then it becomes really cold again. Then it's snowing. Then it's raining. It's been all over.
Yeah, it's a bit wonky now.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, today a lot of times we're going to talk about our theme is your strategy needs a story. So, for instance, for you, a lot of times, how much of strategy did you had to oversee even back in the days when you were working?
Well, when I was working, it was a lot more about strategy for the team, because the strategy for the organization was kind of handed to us from headquarters, and so it was really how do I create a strategy for the team that's in alignment with the strategy for the organization.
Here's what you wrote: business strategy is usually created through a highly rational process, which is true, grounded in facts and analysis. A good strategy must start with engaging those who implement it. Strategies must also be communicated and understood and must motivate action. This is done through stories, all of these, because mere communications of facts and information may not necessarily work, Gordon. And so a lot of times, but the problem is most strategy presentations fall miserably when it comes to casting a vivid mental picture of what it is. Agree, disagree? What would you say about that?
Yeah, so I think when you just state what you hope your team does or the organization does in terms of a strategy, it's usually point one, point two, point three, and there's really no emotional connection. So let me give you an example. I thought a good example was when Jeff Boaz, Jeff Bezos
Bezos
of
over at
Amazon
Amazon.
talked about his new strategy or his pivot strategy in the 2020 letter to the shareholders. He said this: "We have always wanted to be Earth's most consumer centric company. We won't change that. It's got us here. But I'm committing us to an addition. We're going to be Earth's best employer and Earth's safest place to work." And that's the story. I mean,
Yeah.
he's said it in a nice way. It gives us a context, the history. It gives us where we are, and it tells us where we're going.
Correct. Yeah. In some sense, a lot of times is that means you're going to have to bring in different people to tell those stories because the same guys who create the strategy probably isn't the creative guys that will share your strategy and motivate the troops.
Yes, and actually, the strategy itself has got to trickle down through the ranks and be executed by everybody. And if people don't get or to understand or to digest or even to remember what the strategy is, the strategy is quite useless.
Yeah. Like for instance, a lot of times we look at Elon Musk, right, Gordon, is when we think about Tesla, creative, innovative, all the stuff that they're doing with cars. But then at the same time, when he took over Twitter, he's always complaining about problems all the time. And then suddenly you hear all of the morale of the troops, of the employees of Twitter also complaining. And so what this once innovative person with a great vision with Tesla has continued to flub it up over at Twitter in some sense.
Yes, and I think his problem was not so much with what he wanted to do with it, but it was his inability to tell what Twitter was supposed to stand for.
Yes. And don't you think in the process, he ends up critiquing the product and telling you what's wrong with the product and how the guys who used to own Twitter failed. As a result, he's not giving you the vision of what it could be.
Right. So in a way, that story failed. Quite unlike Tesla, where it was a great story because I'm going to recreate or change the idea of what a car is.
Yes. So a couple of things. Strategy stories aren't just about retroactively attaching a narrative to your strategy. To build a strategy story, one must, and you go ahead and describe some things. The first one, establish the factual context for your story. Talk about that.
Yeah. So let me give you an example here. So the Wildlife Conservatory Society, which had this kind of campaign called 96 Elephants. So they were trying to protect elephants. And they did a very interesting thing. So let me first read out the entire story or strategy.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about this first point, establish the factual context of the story. So the entire story starts like this. Last year, poachers killed 35,000 elephants for their task. We're facing an all-out crisis, but we have a simple threefold strategy to save elephants. Stop the killing, stop the trafficking, stop the demand. Simple, very clear images in your mind. So what's establishing the factual context of the story? 35,000 elephants were killed for their task.
Very good.
So that's factual.
Yeah, very good. Second one, leverage the power of questions.
And so I think the power of questions was asking implicitly in both the examples that I said, what is it that we're trying to do? Well, in the case of Jeff Bezos, we're trying to move ahead now, focusing instead of just clients, but employees. In the case of the Wildlife Conservatory, we're trying to stop people from selling tasks. So stop killing elephants. Yeah. So I think that's leveraging the power questions. So people start questioning, why are you saying this? Why are you telling this story?
Yeah. I remember growing up, Gordon, a lot of times Nike did a whole thing on Michael Jordan, and their whole entire commercial was questions. What if you could fly like no other human?
That's amazing, isn't it?
All these different things. And it just kept telling different questions in order to promote one of their Air Jordan branded shoes. And I still remember this to this day.
Correct. And that's a wonderful strategy because there was such a strong image in your mind and you know what you're going to get when you execute the strategy.
Because with this shoe, you could win those championships like Michael. You could soar like Michael. You could be a champion like Michael if you wear that shoe.
Exactly. And it really captures your imagination.
Correct. Third one, write the strategy story.
Yeah. So like I kind of hinted about it earlier, all stories have three parts: the start, the middle section, and the end. And usually the start has something to do with describing the context, something about the past.
Yeah.
The body of the story is where you really have the strategy, and then it tells you about how you're going forward with it. And so I think that's the whole thing about writing that strategy story.
Yeah, yeah. In some sense, I feel like a lot of times politicians use this thing very, very well because a lot of times their strategy story is telling you the problems of the city, the problems of the county, the problems of the government before they became the leader, and then later on, if they were to become mayor, governor, whatever it is, here's what the story of your city will look like.
Correct. And I think a good strategy story would be one where the governor says, problem one, problem two, problem three.
Correct.
And if you elect me, I'll address
Yes.
problem one this way, problem two this way, and problem three this way. And then here's a way forward by saying, elect me to eradicate these problems or to fix these problems.
Like in the city of Chicago, a lot of times the biggest issue that we're having right now is we have a mayor's race, but a lot of times the previous mayor wanted to defund the police. There was just terrible relationship between the police and mayor's office. And so the predominant campaign messages is what happens if you hire a mayor that builds relationship with the police? How does that change the narrative of the story?
Yeah, and that itself implicitly talks about a strategy, which is building relationships with the police.
Yep.
Yeah.
Second from last one, test a story.
Well, this is an interesting one because you're supposed to test it with internal audience. So I guess it's kind of telling that story in different ways with in an internal audience, like your close core group or something like that.
Yeah.
So that you can improve on the imagery, improve on the flow, and improve on what sticks in the mind. So I think testing the story is an important one.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times making sure that you're targeting the right audience. When you're sitting there, how do you best communicate? What are the pushbacks that you give for that particular audience? And a lot of times making sure that strategy works and getting feedback on that strategy.
Yes, yes. So once you've got feedback, then you can tell the story to the audience you want to target the strategy at.
And I say this, Gordon, in some sense, because, like, for instance, Resource Global was the organization that I run and which you have been involved. How I tell the story in Singapore is different than the story that I tell in Nairobi, Kenya, which is different from the one that I tell in Jakarta, Indonesia. But if I sit there and tell you the American story in Singapore without understanding your context and testing it with you, you're going to sit there and say, yeah, that's not for me, and completely disengage.
Yes, and that's exactly the point behind why your strategy needs a story, because the story's got to be suitably told or told a suitable story to the audience.
And so a lot of times when you're testing the strategy, you got to make sure that you're not so tied in with your idea that you're not listening to feedback for people to give you honest feedback on what's going on.
Exactly. And I think it requires the strategist or the person, the leader, to understand what's the context that's behind it, where people's needs, pain points, perhaps.
And Gordon, a lot of times ego plays a role, doesn't it? A lot of times, because if my ego is so big and I think my answers is right without seeking opinions, then I've just shot myself in the foot.
Exactly. Yeah, I thought that we should kind of end this with my favorite piece, which is something that Steve Jobs did when he launched the first iPhone. So this is what he said. He's on stage. It's Apple Day, and he's telling an audience of techies, potential marketeers, distributors, suppliers, and so on and so on. He says this is the day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Context. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been. Well, today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod. Remember, this was before iPhones. The widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And if you remember, Motorola had their mobile phone, right?
The Razr. Yes, the Razr.
That's right. Yes. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. Wow. So you can carry it on. And these are not three separate devices. This is one device, and we're calling it the iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone, and here it is, and it shows the iPhone. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I think it just sticks in your mind.
Yeah.
Three devices in one.
Yeah. Hey, seriously, I think a lot of times this interview that we're having, this talk, your strategy needs a story is so key, because in this day and age, communication is everything, not just in your words, but the vision, the picture that you paint in everyone's minds.
Yes. And I think that's why I like this particular topic, because once you can give or inspire people with a vision or a visual, it kind of changes the things that the way a person remembers it.
Yes, because in this day and age, paying salary and giving more money will only go so far, because once the money stops, they'll lose interest. But if you could inspire a person to see what they can accomplish, now you have it.
Exactly. And I hope we all learn from that and execute a strategy.
Tuesdays with Gordon, your strategy needs a story. Hey, Gordon, I love today's topic. I mean, I personally really, you probably noticed this. I really resonate a lot with this strategy needs a story.
Yeah, I like your story on the Nike. In fact, I was considering wearing the T-shirt that says "Just Do It."
Yes. Well, because now at the same time, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon is coming out with a movie on how Nike signed Michael Jordan, and how that decision really grew the empire for a struggling shoe company that now has become Nike.
Oh, I must look forward to seeing that. I'm looking forward to seeing that now. I must see it.
Yeah. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon.